These are preliminary numbers that we have right now, the ones that we've already submitted to the FBI. The thing about the homicides is many of the homicides, most of the homicides, there's no organized pattern to them. They seem to be random, spontaneous, all over the city. And I call it disorganized versus organized crime. Organized is much easier to deal with. You know based on intelligence what's going to happen, what's not going to happen. With these random, spontaneous types of murders, you don't. And they're next to impossible to prevent unless you know something's happening ahead of time. But almost 100% of the time we don't. So very difficult to prevent, very frustrating from that perspective. Property crime is up. As always, the most prolific property crime is burglary from vehicles. And if you're going to be at the Public Safety Committee this morning, we will show you some photographs of, every year we have a burglary from vehicle task force during the holidays. And this year we made some pretty significant arrests. And the amazing part of that is that these folks who we've arrested for that have a long history of arrests for burglary from vehicles, yet they're still out there doing it. So, the rhetorical question I ask myself is, how many people do we have to arrest to make this stop? And I don't know the answer to that. So I'll stop there for questions.
Chief, what's the clearance rate on the homicides? I believe you've done an analysis and run around.
Yeah, we're working on that right now.
So, but it did, from the analysis that our reporting had done, it does appear lower than the previous 2 years. Plus, you're up in homicides. What do you plan on doing to deal with, the lower clearance rate and the higher caseload?
Well, I'll take your word that we have a lower clearance rate, but I won't take it 100% until we check our own numbers. But we have 2 community engagement teams out there, a mixture of sworn and non-sworn folks who work in the community in the aftermath of a violent crime, trying to talk with folks. And part of the reason why, in these narratives that I read every morning, what I'm reading is that, the victim and the witnesses don't really want to cooperate. And they don't want to cooperate in part, at least, because they're afraid of retaliation, because there's not a whole lot of pretrial detention going on right now. Most of these folks are getting out. And there's a valid fear of retaliation, and that's why these folks don't want to necessarily cooperate with the police and give a lot of information. There are some that do, but a lot of them don't, and I read it every single morning in the reports.
What do you mean by there's not a lot of pretrial detention going on? I understand that there had been some bail reform, but I understand that was mostly a low-level, non-violent crimes.
There's a lot of folks that are getting out pre-trial, low bond, no bond, even for violent crimes. So people are afraid of retaliation, and justifiably so.
So when you say that there's not crime in one specific area, should that be more of a concern because there's crime in more places in the city? What would you tell somebody in San Antonio?
It's all over. And let me go back to this, and you may have heard me say this before. I attribute a lot of this, and there's exceptions, believe me, there's exceptions, but I attribute a lot of this violent crime, shootings and whatnot, I attribute a lot of it to high-risk behavior. The folks out here that are carrying weapons, that have been carrying them for who knows how long, that have CHLs, are not running around shooting people. It's the people who are carrying these guns illegally that are running around shooting people. It's not your concealed carry holder or someone who might have a concealed carry license since the passage of the new law. Since the new law, even the people who are not allowed legally to carry guns were carrying them before this law was passed. And they're the ones that are doing these shootings, not the ones who are legally carrying.
One more question. Chief, you talked about high-risk behavior. Like last night we saw a situation with 5 people were shot at an event that was a family event.
Right.
Is there any chance this is a hate crime, or how are you guys handling this? What do you attribute it to?
Say it again.
How are you handling this investigation? Could it possibly be a hate crime involved?
We don't see any of that right now. I mean, it could develop that, but I don't know. But when I'm talking about high risk behavior, I'm talking about if you're running in a gang, if you're a gang member, if you're selling drugs or buying drugs on the street, if you're engaging in prostitution or soliciting prostitution, that's a high risk lifestyle, and your chances of becoming the victim of a crime, a violent crime, go up when you engage in high risk lifestyles. You have people buying drugs online and meeting people on the street that they've never seen before, and they're getting robbed, they're getting shot. So again, high risk behavior is going to could result in you being the victim of a violent crime. Otherwise, if you're going to work every day, if you're sitting home in retirement every day, if you're taking your kids to and from school or to the basketball game, whatever it may be, your chances of being the victim of a violent crime are very, very low, very low. And with that, I maintain that San Antonio is a safe city unless you're living a high-risk lifestyle, you're engaging in high-risk behavior.
Chief, the
Chief, can you tell us
presentation that you
about-
have, it shows that about 65% of the homicide factors are attributed to either unknown or arguments. Are you including the high-risk lifestyle in there, or are you only referring to the smaller portions where it links it to prostitution? Or child
No,
abuse?
I'm including that in those unknowns as well.
Can you give us an update on the public safety meeting? If you have additional questions, we may be able to answer them there. Thank you.